This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth.
From the beginning of recorded history until the end of the 15th century, people with mental disabilities were regarded as being possessed by demons, subjected to rituals and tortures to scare the demon from the body, and even burned at the stake. The purpose of the earliest asylums was to isolate those perceived as mad from the rest of society. Conditions in such institutions were deplorable. People were often unnecessarily institutionalized, and those labeled as insane were generally seen as, quote, outrageous maniacs, little more than savage animals, end quote. The beginning of the 20th century saw the hunt for the feeble-minded. The eugenics movement followed, advocating forced sterilizations and mercy killings in an attempt to obliterate hereditary so-called mental deficiency, which was seen as the cause of most of society's problems.
The belief was that they were possessed by evil spirits, and that persisted into the 17th and 18th centuries. Often the mentally ill became victims of bizarre exorcisms or casting out rituals. This is a tranquilizer chair. It was developed by Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was the father of American psychiatry, also one of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence. The chair was to calm an agitated patient. He believed that if you strap them in, obviously their muscles are going to relax. From here, he could administer treatment. They would be totally immobilized. Obviously, you've got the hood for sight, legs are strapped, arms are strapped. They might be in this chair for up to 6 months, however long it took to calm them.
They never get out for 6 months?
No, they could be here up to 6 months.
God.
That's the reason for the bucket. Obviously,
Same. So they're
human beings.
So they would be in a gown then, I guess. With
Right, right. They would be in a gown. And obviously, you need to take care of certain needs.
That's sad.
These are trephination tools. We know that in prehistoric times they were drilling holes in skulls. There's been some debate as to what they were trying to accomplish. But we know that they were experimenting with how to heal the brain. There's a trephination drill from 1865. Copper ceremonial trephination knife. The middle is a bronze stone hammer, serrated edge from 1850 that would have been used to cut the skull. They would have thought possessed by demons because they didn't understand the concept of epilepsy. To them, what they were accomplishing with trephination was releasing the demons, whatever was disturbing this person. This is a Utica crib. It's a restraint device from the 19th century. The whole concept came to America brought by a French physician in 1846. Basically, the crib was to keep a person in a certain place. From there, they could deal with whatever therapy they deemed necessary. This particular Utica crib we displayed by installing the door upside down so people could see how terribly scratched it had become in being used.
As you told us, Kathy, there was bite marks and fingernail scratchings on the bottom and on the top, as we can see.
Lots of wear and tear.
I mean, mass madness.
We have an original restraint cage that's a gray steel from Fulton, Missouri, which was State Lunatic Asylum number 1. Up to 3 people might be stuffed in one box.
Treatments in those days involved locking the insane into cages or into straitjackets, bleeding them with leeches, or giving them what were called cold water baths, which meant putting them in tubs full of scalding water and then dunking them into icy cold water as a shock to the system in hopes that it might cure their insanity.
Female patients of all different type of diagnoses, from schizophrenia, from manic depression, even bipolar before it was diagnosed. I mean, at one time in these type of institutions, you could be institutionalized if you couldn't sleep and you had epilepsy or you had autism. They'd walk in that door and never walk out.
Patients' liberation, and we're trying to get attitudes to how people feel towards state hospitals, whether they've ever had any experience themselves with them and that sort of thing. Have you ever been in a hospital, or do you know anyone that has?
Yeah, several times.
You yourself have. How do you feel? Do you feel like you really received treatment there? Do you think it helped you?
Not at all.
Violence somewhere.
Once you're inside a so-called hospital, you simply don't have any rights anymore. I mean, whatever there is on paper, and there are plenty of rights on paper, There are plenty of rights on paper, but the rights in practice are practically non-existent, because if you sign yourself into a mental hospital, you're finished. If you want to get a message to the outside, you're going to have your visitor do it. Nobody is allowing you to go to a phone and call your lawyer.
Part of the myth that psychiatrists have gotten across to people, that they and their hospitals are places where you go when you're upset or flipped out, and they have some kind of way of making you better and better able to cope with your problems. And I just think you find out when you go in that it's not true, that what you're in is a world that you have to learn how to cope with, and it's a very difficult world to cope with, but it's certainly, not anything like what caused your problems in the first place.
You feel that people should be subject to being committed involuntarily?
I don't believe in voluntarily. I think there has to be. I think it has to be for their own feelings. They have to want to, because if there's no real feel for it, I doubt if it can really help them. If they really want to be helped, they can be.
Rockland is in Rockland County's Jersey, right?
No, New York. Well,
you get to?
Not for me, because I got this big heavy thing on my lap.
Pedestrian.
You're really great for landscaping in this freaking place.
Suspended by the same people that did the Central Islip.
Sure. Brought to you by the same people who brought you.
Look at those goddamn porches.
Oh, God, do I remember that?
Yeah, that really just grabbed it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to remember. Describe the orchestra.
Say that what we want to do is take away the power of psychiatrists, the power that they have to lock people up without any trial, without any kind of accusation, without any protection of their rights. I mean, what the American public has done is give the psychiatric profession unlimited power to lock up a certain class of people. Anyone who's accused of being mentally ill has absolutely no rights at all. The American public goes along with this because the psychiatric profession has the kind of image that people feel this power isn't being misused. And we're here today to see that some of this image is rubbed off and people see psychiatrists for what they really are.
Supposedly, they swore to me that they did not give shock treatment. A week after I left, they started doing giving two people shock treatment.
And I think you really have a responsibility to say whether you agree with us or not. Do you think what we say in our leaflet is true? Because your first response to it was to ask us, well, how would we change things? You're running the places, how would you change things? And are you conceding that what we say in our leaflet is true? And if not, let's hear what you do have to say. I'd like to especially hear from Dr. Good, since he runs a state hospital.
Well, he doesn't run one, but he helps run one. Of course, you are wrong in that there is in existence a utilization review committee which checks upon the performance of physicians and their treatment plans
in existence in every state hospital. There is an arm of the court in every state hospital known as the Mental Health Information Service.
Pretend that they don't know what's going on because they can point to all these laws on the books. These laws on the books do not get down to the people in the wards. People do not hear about the Mental Health Information Service. A lot of people in our group never heard of the Mental Health Information Service the whole time they were in the hospital. The first time they heard about it was mentioned in the group. What's the Mental Health Information Service? They're supposed to notify every single patient of their rights. You never heard of them at all, did you, Barbara?
No, not until I joined this group.
No, but I was given a leaflet from the Mental Health Information Service, but I think the first or second day I was in Rockland. It came immediately after I was stripped and skin searched. It had a little different effect.
Do you think that state mental institutions are places where people can be helped when they're having problems?
I think so, yeah. I do.
Are you aware that people can be committed? Anyone is eligible for commitment to an institution upon the word of 2 psychiatrists and a complainant?
And any complainant, not necessarily a relative? I didn't know that.
Do you feel
Your psychiatrist says you're nuts. You better believe it.
anyone can be committed to a hospital upon the word of 2 psychiatrists and a complainant?
Right, I know that.
Do you think that's a good idea?
No. Because
Well?
the complainant sometimes could want to get rid of the person, and I really don't think so.
Any 2 of the 3 of you, by simply signing a form, could lock up any one of the 4 of us for the rest of our lives in a mental institution. And I'm sure at this point you would love to do it if you thought you could get away with it. The fact is that you do have the power to do that. That's precisely the power you have. That's the power that you have, Dr. Good. That's the power that you use every single day at Central Islip.
It is not.
Do you deny that you have the power to lock us up?
I certainly have the power with a colleague to lock somebody up, providing there's a petitioner and providing there is a psychiatric reason for such a move. The Mental Health Information Service tours the wards every week.
They toured the wards at Rockland.
I'm sorry if they didn't tour the wards at Rockland, about which I know nothing, but I do know how often they tour the wards where I am. And furthermore, if it is so farcical, the appearance in court of a patient, how is it that patients are periodically allowed to be released there and then in the courtroom in Pilgrim?
What percentage?
The percentage may be low.
What percentage?
Sure is.
How low? Can you give us the percentage?
I would like to ask of you, no matter how bad your experiences were in the various hospitals you were in, and no matter how sadistic perhaps your psychiatrist, no matter how much they kept you incommunicado, all 4 of you are here and you're loose.
I learned how to play the game. Why did you get out there?
Oh, I just learned to tap dance and do anything old Dr. Prasad wanted me to do.
I think maybe what he's saying is he's sorry we got out.
20 years ago, the patients in a state institution would ask you almost unanimously to leave. Now, a good 50% of people are asking you, please don't discharge me. I am not ready to go. And furthermore, what brings people into a state institution? It is their aberrant behavior.
And in there it's worse because the first sign that you might be getting well, a symptom might be coming out, you know, shoot you with Thorazine. Thorazine drag, man, that's a very real thing.
Mama, oh mama, I heard my baby cry. Don't want to stay here.
I had been in mental hospitals, several mental hospitals from the time I was 13 till I was 16. I was told when I was 16 that I would be there for another 2 years and then maybe they would release me, but more likely they would send me back to the state hospital. I decided those weren't very good odds and had the opportunity to escape, which is what I did. The reason why I got involved with the mental patient self-help movement was for a number of reasons, one of which because I was very angry. I had an incredible sense of outrage at the fact that I was treated so badly for those 3 years, the fact that my adolescence had been virtually taken away from me.
They stripped her almost naked, her hands and feet they tied. They pumped her body full of drugs, how my angel cried.
2 aides, they took me into what was called in hospital, this jargon of Rockland State Hospital was called a section. There was this big bathroom. And they told me to take off all my clothes. And they said, we have to take your clothes to be labeled. And because had been in this private hospital, I had name tapes in all my clothes. And I said, well, I already have name tapes in all my clothes. And they said, no, we have to take your clothes off to be labeled. And I didn't get them back for a couple of weeks. And when I got them back, they had written my name in marking pen on all my clothes, so they were all ruined, even though they wrote it right next to the name tapes. And all my clothes were ruined.
The Lord, he had his crown of thorns. He must have felt the pain when the force of those electric bolts tore my baby's brain.
What happened to me was I was locked up by the psychiatric system. They said my state of mind was an illness, that I was diseased, that I would be sick forever, that I had to take these drugs that made me feel bad. They gave me shock treatment, left me broken.
But I trusted in the doctor, I trusted in the nurse. They said if they didn't have their way, things would get much worse.
So they put me in a room, an isolation room, and they strapped me down in 4-point restraints. And there was just, I don't know if you ever done that. It's like you can't even scratch yourself if you itch. Eventually, you're trying to hold back from going to the bathroom, and you end up going to the bathroom. They drugged me, so there was times when I wasn't even conscious, but there would be stretches. I'd be awake like 2 or 3 hours at a time, and it was just pure hell.
But how can things be worse than this? It's for her good, they said. What kind of comfort is that for me?
My family thought that they were paying for the best. He used the kinds of treatments that were years ago of beating the psychosis out of you. I always felt deep inside of me there was somebody they didn't know who they were doing this to, that I would get back, that they'd hear from me, that someday they would hear from me. I couldn't do it now. My mind was too confused. I was imprisoned, I was locked up, that I would be back.
Normal people, and I want to say, as I said, I say all the time, some of my best friends are normal people. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Just because normal people started World War I, World War II, dropped the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and committed genocide against the Native Americans, instituted slavery. I have nothing against normal people, but I wouldn't want my daughter to marry one, you know what I'm saying? Like normal's supposed to be good or sane, but what's so sane about a businessman in Sacramento wearing a 3-piece suit when it's 105 degrees? It makes more sense to go naked.
I think comedians are normatized deviants. And I've said that when you're a wild and crazy guy out on the street, especially with radical politics, they put you in jail and mental hospitals. When you're a wild and crazy guy on stage, you're known as a comic genius.
Dr. E. Fuller Torrey is at the forefront of a national reform effort to make it easier to force a mentally ill person into treatment.
Many of them don't think they're sick at all. Therefore, if they're not sick, why should they take medication? This is part of the brain damage.
52% of us have been discriminated against because of psychiatric labeling. This stigma creates a very real impact on the quality of our lives and our families. We feel lonely or isolated from other people.
Just like any oppressed group, stigmatized group in our society that are powerless, whether it's been blacks or women or Chicanos, they're the ones that are more victimized. And yet the dominant ideology is always was showing that black man does this, never white man does this. And it's the same thing with ex-mental patients. We're not any more dangerous. In fact, most studies have shown we're less dangerous.
Mental patients are unpredictable, and how do you know they're unpredictable? You know, I say, how do you know John's unpredictable? And they say, well, I know John's unpredictable because I see him do it all the time. I say, well, isn't that a contradiction in terms? So we're dealing with a lot of double standards. And when people think about meaningful work and what they'd like to see so-called mental patients do, what is it? It's like being a security guard at a toxic waste dump, you know, around the Alaskan border.
We would love to influence you to be more interested in some of our goals, which are not your concern.
Well, like, what do you think are not?
I don't think you're particularly concerned that there be more acute hospital care.
No, well, in Italy they're shutting down the hospitals.
If you can suggest how you deal with a person who's dangerous to self or dangerous to others, or what we consider to be gravely disabled, in a totally free and independent living situation, I would be happy to listen to it.
Well, since I was hospitalized 20 times, a lot of people would have said that I am a hopeless, mentally ill person. And it was because of the self-help and the fight for rights that made my life different.
I was considered to be mentally ill for a long period of time.
Howie, you're assuming that there is only black and white, and I'm saying that I still say
you're the one assuming.
No, I say that the majority of the people that we're talking about are unfortunately still too ill to be able to benefit. They can't communicate too well. They can't socialize too well.
You know, there's so many people in our self-help group that fit that description, but are doing real well.
Clients deserve the same basic rights as any other human being, and we always have rights, and that our human rights should not end where our psychiatric diagnosis begins.